How the good man Bruyn took a wife by Honoré de Balzac. Messer Bruyn, he who completed the castle of Rochecorbonnel's Vouvray on the banks of the Loire, was a boisterous fellow in his youth. When quite little he squeezed young ladies, turned the house out of windows, and played the devil with everything when he was called upon to put his sire the Baron of Rochecorbon some few feet under the turf. Then he was his own master, free to lead a life of wild dissipation, and indeed he worked very hard to get a surfeit of enjoyment now by making his crowns sweat, and his goods scarce, draining his land, and a-bleeding his hogsheads and regaling frail beauties. He found himself excommunicated from decent society, and had for his friends only the plunderers of towns and the Lombardians, but the usurers turned rough and bitter as chestnut husks, when he had no other security to give them than his said estate of Rochecorbon, since the Rupes Carbonis was held from our lord the king. Then Bruyn found himself just in the humour to give a blow here and there, to break a collarbone or two and quarrel with everyone about trifles. Seeing which the abbot of Marmoustiers, his neighbour, and a man liberal with his advice, told him that it was an evident sign of lordly perfection that he was walking in the right road, but if he would go and slaughter to the great glory of God the Mahomedans who defiled the Holy Land, it would be better still, and that he would undoubtedly return full of wealth and indulgences into Touraine or into Paradise, whence all barons formerly came. The said Bruyn, admiring the great sense of the prelate, left the country equipped by the monastery, and blessed by the abbot to the great delight of his friends and neighbours. Then he put to the sack enough many towns of Asia and Africa, and fell upon the infidels without giving them warning, burning the Saracens, the Greeks, the English, and others, caring little whether they were friends or enemies, or where they came from, since among his merits he had that of being in no way curious, and he never questioned them until after he had killed them at this business, agreeable to God, to the king, and to himself. Bruyn gained renown as a good Christian and loyal knight, and enjoyed himself thoroughly in these lands beyond the seas, since he more willingly gave a crown to the girls than to the poor, although he met many more poor people than perfect maids. But like a good Turanian, he made soup of anything at length, when he was satiated with the Turk's relics and other blessings of the Holy Land. Bruyn, to the great astonishment of the people of Vouvrelands, returned from the Crusades laden with crowns and precious stones, rather differently from some who, rich when they set out, came back heavy with leprosy, but light with gold. On his return from Tunis, our Lord King Philippe made him a count, and appointed him his seneschal in our country, and that of Poitou. There he was greatly beloved, and properly thought well of, since over and above his good qualities, he founded the church of the Carmes d'Estrolx in the parish of Aigrignolles as the peace offering to heaven for the follies of his youth. Thus was he cardinally consigned to the good graces of the church and of God. From a wicked youth and reckless man, he became a good wise man, and discreet in his dissipations and pleasures, rarely was in anger unless someone blasphemed God before him, the which he would not tolerate, because he had blasphemed enough for everyone in his wild youth. In short, he never quarrelled, because being seneschal people gave up to him instantly. It is true that he at that time beheld all his desires accomplished, the which would render even an imp of Satan calm and tranquil from his horns to his heels, and besides this, he possessed a castle all jagged at the corners and shaped and pointed like a Spanish doublet, situated upon a bank from which it was reflected in the Loire. In the rooms were royal tapestries, furniture, Saracen, pomps, vanities, and inventions, which were much admired by people of Tours, and even by the archbishop and clerks of St. Martin, to whom he sent as a free gift a banner fringed with fine gold. In the neighbourhood of the said castle abounded fair domains, windmills, and forests, yielding a harvest of rents of all kinds, so that he was one of the strongest knights banneret of the province, and could easily have led to battle for our lord the king 1,000 men in his old days, if by chance his bailiff, a diligent man at hanging, brought before him a poor peasant suspected of some offence. He would say, smiling, "Let this one go, Brediff, he will count against those I inconsiderately slaughtered across the seas oftentimes." However, he would let them bravely hang on a chestnut tree or swing on his gallows, but this was solely that justice might be done, and that the custom should not lapse in his domain. Thus the people on his lands were good and orderly, like fresh-veiled nuns, and peaceful, since he protected them from the robbers and vagabonds, whom he never spared, knowing by experience how much mischief is caused by these cursed beasts of prey. For the rest, most devout, finishing everything quickly, his prayers as well as good wine. He managed the processes after the Turkish fashion, having 1,000 little jokes ready for the losers, and dining with them to console them. He had all the people who had been hanged buried in consecrated ground, like godly ones, some people thinking they had been sufficiently punished by having their breath stopped. He only persecuted the Jews now and then, and when they were glutted with usury and wealth, He let them gather their spoil as the bees do honey, saying that they were the best of tax-gatherers, and never did he despoil them save for the profit and use of the churchmen, the king, the province, or himself. This jovial way gained for him the affection and esteem of every one great and small. If he came back smiling from his judicial throne, the abbot of Marmoustiers, an old man like himself, would say, "Ho ha! Messieurs, there is some hanging on since you laugh thus," and when coming from Roch Corbin to Tours, he passed on horseback along the Faubourg St. Symphorien, the little girls would say, "Ah, this is the Justice Day, there is the good man Bruyn," and without being afraid they would look at him astride on a big white hack that he had brought back with him from the Levant on the bridge. The little boys would stop playing with the ball, and would call out, "Good day, Mr. Seneschal," and he would reply jokingly, "Enjoy yourselves, my children, until you get whipped, yes, Mr. Seneschal." Also he made the country so contented, and so free from robbers, that during the year of the great overflowing of the Loire, there were only 22 malefactors hanged, that winter not counting a Jew burned in the commune of Châteauneuf for having stolen a consecrated wafer, or bought it, some said for he was very rich. One day in the following year, about harvest time or mowing time, as we say in Touraine, there came Egyptians, Bohemians, and other wandering troops, who stole the holy things from the church of St. Martin, and in the place and exact situation of Madame the Virgin left by way of insult and mockery to our holy faith, an abandoned pretty little girl about the age of an old dog, stark, naked and acrobat, and of Moorish descent like themselves. For this almost nameless crime, it was equally decided by the king people and the churchmen that the Mooress to pay for all should be burned and cooked alive in the square near the fountain, where the herb market is. Then the good man Bruyn clearly and dexterously demonstrated to the others that it would be a thing most profitable and pleasant to God to gain over this African soul to the true religion, and if the devil were lodged in this feminine body, the faggots would be useless to burn him, as said the said order, to which the archbishop sagely thought most canonical and conformable to Christian charity and the gospel. The ladies of the town and other persons of authority said loudly that they were cheated of a fine ceremony, since the Mooress was crying her eyes out in the jail, and would certainly be converted to God, in order to live as long as a crow, if she were allowed to do so. To which the seneschal replied that if the foreigner would wholly commit herself to the Christian religion, there would be a gallant ceremony of another kind, and that he would undertake that it should be royally magnificent, because he would be her sponsor at the baptismal font, and that a virgin should be his partner in the affair, in order the better to please the Almighty, while himself was reputed never to have lost the bloom or innocence, in fact to be a coquebin in our country of Touraine. Thus are called the young virgin men unmarried, or so esteemed, to distinguish them from the husbands and the widowers, but the girls always pick them without the name, because they are more light-hearted and merry than those seasoned in marriage. The young Mooress did not hesitate between the flaming faggots and the baptismal water. She much preferred to be a Christian and live than be Egyptian, and be burned thus to escape a moment's baking. Her heart would burn unquenched through all her life, since for the greater surety of her religion, she was placed in the convent of nuns near Chardonneret, where she took the vow of sanctity. The said ceremony was concluded at the residence of the archbishop, where on this occasion, in honour of the Saviour or men, the lords and ladies of Touraine hopped, skipped and danced. For in this country, the people dance, skip, eat, flirt, have more feasts, and make merrier than any in the whole world. The good old seneschal had taken for his associate the daughter of the lord of Azil Riddle, which afterwards became Azil Brussel, the which lord, being a crusader, was left before Acre, a far distant town, in the hands of a Saracen, who demanded a royal ransom for him, because the said lord was of high position. The lady of Azay having given his estate as security to the Lombards and extortioners, in order to raise the sum, remained without a penny in the world, awaiting her lord in a poor lodging in the town, without a carpet to sit upon, but proud as the Queen of Sheba and brave as a mastiff who defends the property of his master. Seeing this great distress, the seneschal went delicately to request this lady's daughter to be the godmother of the said Egyptian, in order that he might have the right of assisting the lady of Azay. And in fact, he kept a heavy chain of gold which he had preserved since the commencement of the taking of Cyprus, and the which he determined to clasp about the neck of his pretty associate. But he hung there at the same time his domain, and his white hairs, his money, and his horses. In short, he placed there everything he possessed directly. He had seen Blanche of Azay dancing a pavane among the ladies of Tours, although the Moorish girl, making the most of her last day, had astonished the assembly by her twists, jumps, steps, springs, and elevations, and artistic efforts. Blanche had the advantage of her, as everyone agreed, so virginally and delicately did she dance. now Bruyn admiring this gentle maiden, whose toes seemed to fear the boards, and who amused herself so innocently for her 17 years like a grasshopper, trying her first note was seized with an old man's desire, a desire apoplectic and vigorous from weakness, which heated him from the sole of foot to the nape of his neck, for his head had too much snow on the top of it to let love lodge there. Then the good man perceived that he needed a wife in his manner, and it appeared more lonely to him than it was, and what then was a castle without a chatelaine, as well have a clapper without its bell. In short, a wife was the only thing that he had to desire, so he wished to have one promptly, seeing that if the Lady of Azay made him wait, he had just time to pass out of this world into the other. But during the baptismal entertainment he thought little of his severe wounds, and still less of the 80 years that had stripped his head. He found his eyes clear enough to see distinctly his young companion, who, following the injunctions of the Lady of Azay, regaled him well with glance and gesture, believing there could be no danger near so old a fellow, in such wise that Blanche, naive and nice as she was in contradistinction to the girls of Touraine, who are as wide awake as a spring morning, permitted the good man first to kiss her hand, and afterwards her neck, rather low down at least. So said the archbishop who married them the week after, and that was a beautiful bridal, and a still more beautiful bride. The said Blanche was slender and graceful as no other girl, and still better than that, more maidenly than ever maiden, was a maiden all ignorant of love, who knew not why, or what it was, a maiden who wondered why certain people lingered in their beds, a maiden who believed that children were found in parsley beds. Her mother had thus reared her in innocence, without even allowing her to consider trifle as it was how she sucked in her soup between her teeth. Thus she was a sweet flower and intact, joyous and innocent, an angel who needed but the wings to fly away to paradise, when she left the poor lodging of her weeping mother to consummate her betrothal at the cathedral of St. Gatian and St. Maurice. The country people came to a feast there, eyes upon the bride, and on the carpets which were laid down all along the Rue de la Sellerie, and all said that never had tinier feet pressed the ground of Touraine, prettier eyes gazed up to heaven, or a more splendid festival adorned the streets with carpets and with flowers. The young girls of St. Martin and of the Berths of Chateau Neuf all envied the long tresses with which doubtless Blanche had fished for a count, but much more did they desire the gold-embroidered dress, the foreign stones, the white diamonds, and the chains with which the little darling played, and which bound her for ever to the said seneschal. The old soldier was so merry by her side that his happiness showed itself in his wrinkles, his looks, and his movements. Although he was hardly as straight as a billhook, he held himself so by the side of Blanche that one would have taken him for a soldier on parade receiving his officer, and he placed his hand on his diaphragm like a man whose pleasure stifles and troubles him, delighted with the sound of the swinging bells, the procession, the pomps, and the vanities of the said marriage, which was talked of long after the episcopal rejoicings. The women desired a harvest of Moorish girls, a deluge of old seneschals, and baskets full of Egyptian baptisms. But this was the only one that ever happened in Touraine, seeing that the country is far from Egypt, and from Bohemia. The Lady of Azay received a large sum of money after the ceremony, which enabled her to start immediately for Acre to go to her spouse, accompanied by the lieutenant and soldiers of the Count of Rochcorbon, who furnished them with everything necessary. She set out on the day of the wedding, after having placed her daughter in the hands of the seneschal, enjoining him to treat her well, and later on she returned with the Sire d'Azay, who was leprous, and she cured him, tending him herself, running the risk of being contaminated, the which was greatly admired. The marriage ceremony finished, and at an inn, for it lasted 3 days, to the great contentment of the people. Messer Bruyn, with great pomp, led the little one to his castle, and according to the custom of husbands, had her put solemnly to bed in his couch, which was blessed by the abbot of Marmaustiers, then came and placed himself beside her in the great feudal chamber of Rochcorbon, which had been hung with green brocade and ribbon of golden wire. When old Bruyn, perfumed all over, found himself side by side with his pretty wife, he kissed her first upon the forehead, and then upon the little round white breast, on the same spot where she had allowed him to clasp the fastenings of the chain. But that was all. The old fellow had too great confidence in himself, in fancying himself able to accomplish more, so then he abstained from love, in spite of the merry nuptial songs, the epithalamiums and jokes, which were going on in the rooms beneath where the dancing was still kept up. He refreshed himself with a drink of the marriage beverage, which according to custom had been blessed, and placed near them in a golden cup. The spices warmed his stomach well enough, but not the heart of his dead ardour. Blanche was not at all astonished at the demeanour of her spouse, because she was a virgin in mind, and in marriage she saw only that which is visible to the eyes of young girls, namely dresses, banquets, horses, to be a lady and mistress, to have a country seat to amuse oneself, and give orders so like the child that she was. She played with the gold tassels on the bed, and marvelled at the richness of the shrine in which her innocence should be interred, feeling a little later in the day his culpability, and relying on the future, which however would spoil a little every day that, with which he pretended to regale his wife. The seneschal tried to substitute the word for the deed, so he entertained his wife in various ways, promised her the keys of his sideboards, his granaries, and chests, the perfect government of his houses and domains, without any control hanging round her neck the other half of the loaf, which is the popular saying in Touraine. She became like a young charger full of hay, found her good man the most gallant fellow in the world, and raising herself upon her pillow began to smile, and beheld with greater joy this beautiful green brocaded bed, where henceforward she would be permitted without any sin to sleep every night, seeing she was getting playful. The cunning lord, who had not been used to maidens, but knew from experience the little tricks that women will practice, seeing that he had much associated with ladies of the town, feared those handy tricks, little kisses and minor amusements of love, which formerly he did not object to, but which at the present time would have found him cold as the obit of a pope. Then he drew back towards the end of the bed, afraid of his happiness, and said to his too delectable spouse, "Well, darling, you are a seneschal's wife now, and very well seneschaled as well." "Oh no," said she. "How no," replied he in great fear, "are you not a wife?" "No," said she, "nor shall I be till I have had a child." "Did you while coming here see the meadows?" began again the old fellow. "Yes," said she. "Well, they are yours." "Oh, oh," replied she, laughing, "I shall amuse myself much there catching butterflies." "That's a good girl," says her lord, "and the woods?" "Ah, I should not like to be there alone, you will take me there. But," said she, "give me a little of that liquor which Lapanus has taken such pains to prepare for us." "And why, my darling, it would put fire in your body." "Oh, that's what I should like," said she, biting her lip with vexation, "because I desire to give you a child as soon as possible, and I am sure that liquor is good for the purpose." "Ah, my little one," said the seneschal, knowing by this that Blanche was a virgin from head to foot, "the good will of God is necessary for this business, and women must be in a state of harvest." "And when should I be in a state of harvest?" asked she, smiling. "When nature so wills it," said he, trying to laugh. "What is it necessary to do for this?" replied she. "Ah, a cabalistical and alchemical operation, which is very dangerous." "Ah," said she with a dreamy look, "that's the reason why my mother cried when thinking of the said metamorphosis, but Bertha de Bruley, who is so thankful for being made a wife, told me it was the easiest thing in the world." "That's according to the age," replied the old lord, "but did you see at the stable the beautiful white mare so much spoken of in Touraine?" "Yes, she is very gentle and nice." "Well, I give her to you, and you can ride her as often as the fancy takes you." "Oh, you are very kind, and they did not lie when they told me so." Here continued he, "sweetheart, the butler, the chaplain, the treasurer, the equerry, the farrier, the bailiff, even the Sire de Montsoreau, the young varlet, whose name is Gautier, and bears my banner with his men at arms, captains, followers, and beast-soul, are yours, and will instantly obey your orders, under pain of being incommoded with a hempen collar." "But," replied she, "this mysterious operation, cannot it be performed immediately?" "Oh no," replied the seneschal, "because it is necessary above all things that both the one and the other of us should be in a state of grace before God, otherwise we should have a bad child full of sin, which is forbidden by the canons of the Church. This is the reason that there are so many incorrigible scapegraces in the world. Their parents have not wisely waited to have their souls pure, and have given wicked souls to their children. The beautiful and the virtuous come of immaculate fathers. That is why we cause our beds to be blessed, as the abbot of Marmaustiers has done. This one, have you not transgressed the ordinances of the Church?" "Oh no," said she quickly, "I received before Mass absolution for all my faults, and have remained since without committing the slightest sin." "You are very perfect," said the cunning lord, "and I am delighted to have you for a wife, but I have sworn like an infidel." "Oh, and why?" "Because the dancing did not finish, and I could not have you to myself to bring you here and kiss you." Thereupon he gallantly took her hands, and covered them with kisses, whispering to her little endearments and superficial words of affection, which made her quite pleased and contented. Then, fatigued with the dance and all the ceremonies, she settled down to her slumbers, saying to the seneschal, "I will take care tomorrow that you shall not sin," and she left the old man quite smitten with her white beauty, amorous of her delicate nature, and as embarrassed to know how he should be able to keep her in her innocence, as to explain why oxen chew their food twice over, although He did not augur to himself any good therefrom. It inflamed him so much to see the exquisite perfections of Blanche during her innocent and gentle sleep, that he resolved to preserve and defend this pretty jewel of love. With tears in his eyes, he kissed her sweet golden tresses, the beautiful eyelids, and her ripe red mouth. And he did it softly for fear of waking her. There was all his fruition the dumb delight, which still inflamed his heart, without in the least affecting Blanche. Then he deplored the snows of his leafless old age, the poor old man, that he saw clearly that God had amused himself by giving him nuts when his teeth were gone.